Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. It's Football at 4.
And Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. We know we're getting close to football season when we start to take a look at our division previews, and that's what we'll start today. The AFC East, Andrew DiCecco is here from InsideTheBirds.com as we take a look at the AFC East, which, man, I think this division is going to be really interesting. Probably I'll ask Andrew, maybe 4 potential playoff teams. I think people look at the Patriots maybe a little down from where they generally are, but they were right in the playoff mix last year, Andrew. So this AFC East, a lot different than the AFC East we have seen over the last, couple of years, really going back to the Patriot glory years. They were the only team in the East. Now, probably 3 of the 4 teams have a pretty good argument to win this division.
I would say that's pretty accurate. Mike, how are you? I think that's pretty accurate to say here. I think there's going to be a closely contested divisional push here amongst the 3 teams. I think the Patriots might be a little bit further back in the division running, but I think that you have 3 teams right now that could make a serious playoff push. I don't want to give away where I'm going to have them ranked until the very end, but yeah, that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah. Let's go through this division. Buffalo has kind of been the class the last 2-3 seasons here, and they're the team that really has this window. Is the window still there? Are they still the top dog? Let's start with them. Let's look at them at the quarterback spot. Josh Allen's still one of the best in the league. Is he still the guy in that AFC East for you?
Yeah, without a doubt. I have him as the 4th best quarterback in the league behind Jalen Hurts. And, he needs to be able to deliver on the big stage. Obviously, last season, I had him, before the season, I depicted him to be the MVP of the season. And knowing that there is so much riding, there's a lot of hype around Josh Allen. So I was kind of a little bit underwhelmed when they got into the crucial part of the season and the playoffs. I thought that he was going to be able to do enough to propel his team to get the win there. I mean, we saw him go toe-to-toe with Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs a couple of years ago. That was one of the greater performances that we've gotten a chance to see. But I think that he has a lot to prove this year, and to being able to put his stamp on one of the elite quarterbacks in this league. But he has a number of weapons and a good defense to fall back on.
Yeah, so Allen obviously, kind of hitting his peak years here, and he's going to do it with a great wide receiving core with Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis. This whole Diggs story is kind of, weird here. Dawson Knox, a tight end. They went out and got Kincaid. What does this offense look like? Because this is a team that does not run the ball all that much.
Yeah, they really don't. And looking at the running back position before we even get into the passing game, I mean, James Cook to me he's their top running back right now. But is he a top running back in the NFL on an NFL team? He shouldn't be. I think he's more of a complementary piece. And then beyond him, they have Damian Harris, who is very talented when healthy, but unfortunately that is few and far between. And I think that obviously if he was more available, he wouldn't have been. They wouldn't have gotten him for the bargain that they did. But right now, that's going to be the 1-2 punch at running back. Receiver, I mean, look at Diggs. Gabe Davis was a player that I had high hopes for last year. I didn't think he quite lived up to expectations, and some of them may have been a little bit unfair to make that big leap from year 1 to year 2. Trent Sherfield is going to be their slot receiver, and Khalil Shakur is a player who has a lot of speed, and I liked him at Boise State. I think he can be a good number 4. And don't forget, they drafted Justin Shorter, a wide receiver from the University of Florida, in the 5th round. He has a little bit of an uphill climb to eat into their snaps, but I liked him throughout the pre-draft process quite a bit. And Dalton Kincaid, who you mentioned to me, I really thought that they needed to add to the tight end position. Dawson Knox is a pretty good player. I think they could have upgraded from there, and they get Dalton Kincaid, who reminds me a lot of Zach Ertz, good route runner, can really threaten the seam and work the middle of the field and give him that option. That safety valve over the middle of the field. So they definitely have improved in that area.
Yeah, their offense going to be interesting. Will they run the ball this year? Do they have that guy to turn around and hand it to help out the pass game? And obviously Josh Allen there. And obviously you take a look, at this offense as a whole. They're one of the more explosive teams in the league. If Diggs is still that player, we'll see what ends up happening with him. You go on the defensive side of the ball, this is a team that, Von Miller had ended the season hurt. Oliver, they drafted a couple of years ago. Tre'Davious White, one of the big names over there. Jordan Poyer is still in the mix. But how many, where would you kind of rank this defense in terms of a playoff level defense?
Well, I still think it's one of the best, Mike. But when I look at what was their downfall last season, I thought that they got really largely manhandled by the Cincinnati Bengals, and I don't think they really did enough, in my opinion, at least, to really put them over the top. I think they still have a defense that's going to put them in the conversation for to be one of the preeminent teams in the league. I like Greg Russo. I like Ed Oliver, who you mentioned. Von Miller's a good pass rusher still at this stage of his career. Matt Milano, their linebacker, is one of the more underrated players at his position. Then you look at the cornerback position. Tre'Davious White's my favorite corner in the league. And Kaiir Elam, who they drafted in the first round in 2022, is a pretty good complement opposite him. I think they have high expectations for him, obviously, and I think he's going to start to come into his own. And then you have the safety tandem, the veteran safety tandem of Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. So they do have some solidified pieces there to build around, and I think that there's enough there for them to obviously make some noise here in the league again this year.
All right, Miami Dolphins, everybody seems to like this team, especially when Tua is there. So what is your view now of Tua? We know the injuries. We know some people thought maybe he should step away from the game, but what kind of season do you anticipate from him with the receiving core he has?
Man, you talk about an explosive team. I love what the Dolphins have done. I've loved what they built. And they're one of those teams that I think are going to make a serious push for one of the better teams in the league this year, if they stay healthy. And a lot of it obviously revolves around the health of Tua Tagovailoa, who you've already mentioned. And I think they've surrounded him with so many weapons here, Mike, that he's going to be able to get rid of the football quicker. I think his offensive line is pretty competent. So, I mean, a lot of their hopes obviously hinge on the quarterback, but they also added Mike White in free agency, which I thought was one of the more underrated signings. I think that he was probably one of the better backup quarterbacks available, and I even mentioned him when in the Eagles situation as a potential candidate. But I think he gives them a decent security blanket, somebody who's played capably in his limited opportunities. But I mean, you look at Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, Braxton Berrios was a tremendous signing who's going to provide value from the slot and also as a returner. And then you look at even beyond that, Chosen Anderson, formerly Robbie Anderson, he's there. Cedric Wilson comes over from the Cowboys. Their tight end position, there's not a lot there. Mike Gesicki obviously left. Their number one tight end right now would be a guy named Durham Smythe. And I mean, there's going to be a competition for that there. There's a number of guys that are relatively, they're not household names. They're relatively pedestrian. So that would be their one weak area. I love their running back situation. Raheem Mostert, one of the fastest players at his position. Jeff Wilson, who they acquired last year, is a big bruiser that's going to be a factor in the goal line. And then you look at Devin Achane, who I think is a player who could become a focal point in the offense, given the injury history to the two players who I just mentioned. They got him in the third round from Texas A&M this year. So there's a lot to like for that offense, and they're just like a track team on a football field.
Yeah, they are a very fun team to watch, and the health of Tua is what could be the big difference for this team. You talked about Waddle and Hill. You got those two guys both, over 1,000-yard players. I mean, they just need the quarterback to stay healthy. When he was healthy last year, there were some people looking at them as a possible Super Bowl team. You go to their defensive side of the ball, they made trade they got Chubb. This is a team that I don't think you think default, but Jalen Ramsey's over there now. But what about the rest of this defense? How do you look at this defense? Is this defense good enough?
The Vic Fangio-led defense, by the way.
There you go.
Defense. I really do think so. I mean, you have Raekwon Davis. I'm just talking about their defensive line. Christian Wilkins. You have Emmanuel Agba, who's a reserve. I love their pass rushing linebackers in Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb. That's going to provide some much needed pressure off the edges there. Then you already alluded to their cornerback situation. Jalen Ramsey, Xavier Howard. They drafted Cam Smith from South Carolina in the second round, who's a long, lengthy, physical player on the outside, similar skill set to what they already have there. And Javon Holland, the safety from Oregon, who's played quite well over the past couple of seasons. He hasn't quite gotten the love that he deserves. But, I mean, they have a very well-rounded defense. And like you said, this is all predicated around the health of Tua Tagovailoa. If he's able to stay healthy, this is a preseason proclamation of mine, but I think they can make some Super Bowl noise this season. They're that good, and I think that their offense is going to be good enough to they're going to probably score in the 30s, I would imagine, weekly.
Yeah, I know that that team's going to be a lot of fun to watch in that AFC upper echelon there, those two teams. And then, of course, there's a third team in the mix this year. It's the Jets. Are they the third team in the mix? Are they a team that's on the same level as Buffalo and Miami? You got Aaron Rodgers. You got, obviously, Garrett Wilson, who I like a lot. They went out and got Hardman. They got Lazard. Hall, the running back, he should be coming back at some point. So what do we look at this Jets offense? Are they on par with the other two teams?
I don't know. I'm always waiting for the other shoe to drop with the Jets. I think that they're a team that always has some sort of scrutiny or scandal or some sort of controversy going on with them. So until they prove otherwise, I'm not completely buying what they're selling right now, and I don't necessarily believe the hype. Now, that being said, I have them third in the rankings right now amongst the four teams, but I think it's going to revolve around Breece Hall and what he's able to do coming back from that knee injury last season. If the Jets are able to provide a balanced offense and not have to rely on Aaron Rodgers to play hero ball and become too one-dimensional, I think that they're going to have a chance to win some games, because I really like what they've done on the defensive side of the ball. You mentioned Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson was a player who really made an early impact as a rookie last season. Very advanced route runner, explosive player. Obviously, they have a number of weapons there. You mentioned Alan Lazard. You mentioned Mecole Hardman, explosive player out of the slot. They also have Mims and Corey Davis are still there. Offensive line wise, they're in a decent shape there. They drafted Joe Tippmann, the center, who I really like, particularly even for the Eagles. He's going to be able to step right in there and start. They've invested first-round picks in their right guard, Vera Tucker. They have Mekhi Becton, who unfortunately hasn't been able to stay healthy, but he's very athletic. They drafted him in the first round in 2020. Left tackle Dwayne Brown's still there. He's a veteran that's seen it all. From an offensive standpoint, I think they're going to be able to hold their own. I just don't put it necessarily in the same class as the other two teams we've outlined.
Let's look at, their defense, as you kind of hinted at. They were good on defense last year. This was like a Super Bowl level defense at times last year. Sauce Gardner, I know you like him a lot. Quinnen Williams, they went out and got. This is a team that is a very good defensive team. So does this defense, is it good enough to keep them in the mix in the AFC East?
They have two of my favorite players, two of my favorite defensive players, and Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams. I love watching their style of play. Arguably two of the best players at their respective positions. DJ Reed, the corner, is me playing opposite Sauce Gardner. He's going to get thrown at a lot, obviously, but I think he's a tremendously under-discussed player. I thought he's quietly come on, over the past couple of seasons. You mentioned defensive line. How about Jermaine Johnson, who was drafted in the first round in 2022? They drafted another defensive lineman in Will McDonald in the first round this year. Was a bit of a surprise at 15 from Iowa State. They have a lot of – my point being is that they have a lot of depth there and a healthy rotation, which obviously is going to alleviate some pressure from the secondary. They lost Chuck Clark, the safety, to a torn ACL, unfortunately, there. But they have a lot of talent there to, like I said, make some noise in this division.
Yeah, those three there, I think everybody would agree, are at the top of the list and probably in play for the division. Let's go to the team that over the years, if we were having the same conversation, we would talk about first, and that is the New England Patriots and kind of where they are now. Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4, our division previews, starting with the AFC East, and you got the New England Patriots here. Mac Jones, what do we think of Mac Jones now as, entering his third season as their quarterback?
Not necessarily a difference maker, a middling quarterback, somebody that can get the job done, but I think he needs a lot of things to work in his favor in order to be successful. I think he needs a lot of pieces and components to thrive in this league. I don't think he's somebody that can necessarily create. All that being said, I think Ramondre Stevenson is an interesting player there at running back. He surpassed 1,000 yards and he had 5 rushing touchdowns. He's a bigger running back. They lost Damian Harris. So I think that he's going to be a player that a lot of people are going to really look at in fantasy leagues. There's not a lot behind him. I think Ty Montgomery is the only guy, and he came over from the Saints, but he's not really anybody that's going to threaten Stevenson for carries. I think he's going to be the bell cow there. Receivers, they have Devontae Parker. He's been an enigma for much of his career, former first-round pick, of course. But they added Juju Smith-Schuster, who Eagles fans know quite well, and they'll get their first look at him week 1. And Kendrick Bourne's still there, and they have Tyquan Thornton, who's an interesting player. He was their second-round pick last season. Didn't really amount to much last year, but he is their most explosive player. But I think right now he's sort of in the background, and he's going to have to put his stamp on a more prominent role. So that's kind of what their offense. Oh, we haven't even gotten into their tight ends, Hunter Henry, and they have who else do they have? Gesicki. Yeah, that's right. They got Gesicki over from the Dolphins. So they have a couple of good players there.
Yeah, Gesicki, goes from Miami to New England, and they're one of those teams that the names don't jump off the page, but that's the way it was back in the day. But they had Tom Brady, and they have a very similar team without Tom Brady. A lot of this nice pieces. You mentioned Parker, who was down in Miami, never really he had that big game against the Eagles the one year for Miami. Yeah. Juju Smith-Schuster's there, so we'll see if Mac Jones and that crew. Offensively where they are. But what about this team defensively? This is another team where you're like, all right, what's the name that pops off the page at me? What kind of defense does Bill Belichick have?
Well, I think the name that pops off to me, is Christian Gonzalez, who was a tremendous value in the middle of the first round. Obviously, Jack Jones is out of the equation for now, but Jonathan Jones will pair opposite him. Kyle Duggar is a player who I really liked. He was a small school prospect. He's their strong safety. He's built more. He's like a hybrid type of player. Christian Barmore, I really liked coming out of Alabama from the defensive line. And they also drafted Keon White out of LSU in the second round. He's an interesting player. I think he's going to have an early impact as a rookie. I'm interested to see what Steve Belichick and Gerard Mayo are able to do here because they have some interesting pieces, but I don't think their defense is anywhere near the same stratosphere as the other three teams.
All right, so New England, it sounds like, is a step behind Andrew DiCecco, football at 4. Let's take a look at how you stack up this year's AFC East, which might be, of all the division previews, trying to predict this division might be the most difficult.
Well, Mike, right now I have the Bills as the clear leaders for now. I think the Dolphins can make things interesting. I have them at 2. I have the Jets at 3 and the Patriots at 4.
All right, there you go. Patriots pulling up the rear again. And what was it? Who was it first again?
The Buffalo Bills.
Buffalo Bills. So you like Buffalo to hang on for another year because people are looking at that team and wondering if they missed their window. The last 2 seasons where they were a favorite for much of the season, and then they of course lost these playoff games. So is that window kind of closing? Is this for you their last window, or do you think they still have a couple more runs?
No, I think the window's cracked open, Mike, ever so slightly. I think this is their chance to really seize control of that. But the Dolphins are coming. I'm telling you. Like I said, it all depends on Tua's health. But if they're able to keep him healthy and keep him upright, watch out.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I remember last year, Miami, I think, was 7-2 at one point or, somewhere right there. And right when Tua ended up getting hurt, I do my fine 5, ugly 5. I had them in my 5. I thought they were one of the 5 best teams in the league. And then when Tua got hurt, I think their season really depends on the health of Tua this season. Because if they have him, that offense is cranking. And as you mentioned, their defense is good enough that they can be in play. The Jets will be fun. And as you mentioned, you like Buffalo still. So AFC East should be.
Well, I'll tell you what. I'm really interested to see how the Eagles' defensive backs stack up with Miami's speed at receiver when they see each other in late October this year. That's going to be a pretty big test because the Eagles don't have a ton of defensive backs that can run. So I'll be interested to see if they're able to apply enough pressure where that won't matter.
And keep in mind, the Eagles this year will play the entire AFC East. So all 4 of the teams we just talked about will be on the Eagles' schedule this year. All right, next week we've got the AFC North, and we'll talk about that on our division previews with Andrew DiCecco from InsideTheBirds.com as we quickly, man, that was a quick rip through the AFC East. Buffalo wins it, according to Andrew. We'll talk to you next week, man.
You bet. Talk soon.
I love the previews. You get a chance in that AFC East. You get an opportunity to kind of take a look at the teams the Eagles will be playing this year, that AFC East, the Buffalo Bills, the Miami Dolphins, the New York Jets, and, of course, the New England Patriots are all on the Eagles' schedule.